All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depends on where you are in this world. My part of the world is Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Training Center in Doral, Miami, Florida. And we're here today with Captain Mike Dugan. The man behind the curtain that you don't see is Peter Procchio. And from the great White North, just back from his moose hunting expedition in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, is our Canadian brother, James Johnson. And from Las Vegas, Nevada, we got Captain Clark Lamping of the Clark County Fire Department. Before we begin our session today, I've asked Captain Mike to say a few words about our brother Bobby, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go on with the program. Mike, if you could have the honors.
I would love to, Bill. Thank you. We just have to give a shout out to our brother, Bobby Halton, who left us right before Christmas on Monday, December 19th. Bobby was one of my best friends. He helped all of us in the fire service. And the things I want to say about my friend Bobby is he was a man of faith. He believed in family. He believed in the fire service. He believed in his faith, and he believed in everyone around him. He made you a better fireman for being a friend of Bob's. And I don't care if you met him once or 100 times, he always treated you the same. He was a gentleman. And I think each and every one of us, as paying homage to Bob, should try to be a little more like him and be that type of person, be a mentor, be a friend, and be that type of person. I was lucky enough to attend his service in Collinsville, Oklahoma, which was a very, very small service, which his wife had asked for. And I know there's going to be something done out at FDIC in his memory. So for those of you who couldn't make it with us out to Collinsville, Oklahoma, we look forward to seeing you and remembering Bobby at FDIC. And I'm not sure what that's going to entail yet, but I think it's going to be an incredible thing. So we look forward to it. And for those of you who see myself, Captain Gustin, Clark Lamping, James, and any of our other contestants at FDIC, please come up and share your story about Bob with us. We want to keep his memory alive because of what he did for the fire service. Godspeed, brother.
Yeah. We're all better people because of him. I want to thank our good friends at keyhose.com, namely Dave Hibben and Mark Lighthill, who I just talked to this morning. Dave Hibben and Mark Lighthill are both veteran firefighters. Yes, they make their living selling key hose. That's fine. They have to put food on their table, but you know you're getting years of experience that comes with that hose, and they're always striving to do the best. Make the best product for the fire service. Last time I checked, I think we're still a capitalist economy. And as such, every hose manufacturer is trying to create the best product they can. There's different grades, different models. As I say it on every one of these hangouts, take the key challenge. Try to kink the key hose. We're going to resume with where we left off last month. And we were talking about fires in commercial buildings. And I asked James to be our special guest because a fella from his side of the border reached out to both of us about a particular type of roof system, which is commonly found in parking structures. However, it turns out it's not just in parking structures in Canada, and in my part of the world, it's everywhere. And we don't ever want to equate the massive concrete size and appearance of precast pre-tension, pre-stressed concrete structural members. We're talking about twin T roofs. That includes twin T roofs with any degree of fire resistance. So James, I have some pictures and let's see. Let's go with the pictures first, and then I'm going to have James opine on some of these things. I think the deck one, there, that's what we're talking. Perfect, Peter. That's what we're talking about. Now, you would think that that is heavy duty, fire resistive, type 1 construction. It is hardly that. Okay, that's the way it looks. And the two, what would you say, James, webs or the flanges? The web, right?
Yeah, you could call it a web. Like I always like to kind of think of it as like the top of the T is like, if you think of it in conventional kind of terms, that's like a decking, and then you'd have like your beam or your joist. If you kind of think about it in that way, is the web. Just kind of keep terminology kind of similar.
Okay, and James, are we talking about the same thing, you and I?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, next slide there. Okay, now this is an interesting picture. It's twin T's that collapsed, and this was not a hot fire. This was a nasty smoldering fire in a warehouse containing bulk rolls of paper that they're going to make toilet paper out of. So as you can see that they've lost their bearing. One of the scary things about this, and James, I'm going to ask you what your code requires. Our codes only require 4 inches of bearing surface. In other words, the end of the T would rest on a pilaster or a girder or a column, and there would only be 4 inches of bearing surface. Now, yes, there is welded embedments, if you will, angle iron embedded in the structural member and its bearing surface, but that is not enough to withstand the sag. Now, that roofing, to the best of my knowledge, is TPO, and I wrote it down here. That would be 50 cents, please. Thermoplastic polyolefin. It's a single ply membrane. I just had a discussion with a guy that was in the roofing business, and he tells me that that kind of roof is a double-edged sword. Yes, it does not burn, but he's been to fires where he's seen, like over here to your left. What's underneath that? What is under? Is there anything underneath that? So it is entirely conceivable that the structural member, the whole roof deck, could come down and the TPO membrane would remain intact. Very scary, and definitely a teaching moment for sounding with your tool. Do we have any more pictures in that collection there? Okay, this is how they're made. You have a concrete form, and oh, by the way, over to the right, you will see a one of its cousins. That is a that could use that for a roof or a floor slab, but that right there is about 50% nothing but airspace. Sometimes they fill those cells with styrofoam or some kind of insulation, and they are more vulnerable to fire exposure than these guys. But that's what you're looking at, that's the form at the precast plant. We got another one there, Peter? Otherwise, we'll go to the next group of slides.
Stand by, Bill. I'm trying to get
Yeah,
it.
no, you're doing a great job. Great job.
So, are you seeing this one, Bill? Hang on.
No, I'm seeing the fire engineering logo. No worries, man. We'll get it. Okay.
There we go.
This is pre-tension, pre-stress. Before they pour the concrete, that's the form, they will tension those cables to, I think, James, around 13,000 pounds. You would measure those in Newton meters, wouldn't you?
No, we use the same system for that sort of stuff.
James, I'm trying to impress the audience with my international flair. Newton meters. Okay, next one, Peter. So that device there puts the tension on this sucker, and like I say, the several thousand pounds. Hey, James, how about kips? Is that in your
Kips, yes.
Kips, okay.
Yes.
All right. So you and I are the only two guys in the North American continent that knows what kips are. All right, next slide. Okay, they got this contraption. They pour the concrete into that thing. Keep going. This is the scary part right there, James. Is yes, there's a weld right there at that joint between that girder and the T, but it is not strong enough to withstand the sag. Next. All right. Why that is not on the ground, I don't know. But the way that this thing can span fairly great distances, 50, 60, 70 feet, you see them on truck trailers, flatbed trailers, is that, you know, all of us students of the fire service understand that there's very little, if any, compressive strength in concrete. It derives its strength in compression, not tension. So what they're doing is those cables are pulling this concrete together to the point where it'll actually form like a crown for drainage. Anything else you got there? Okay, that has to do with metal deck roofs. We'll talk about that later. And in fact, when we get to that, I'm going to have Mike weigh in on that because they've got some pretty strict and we'll wait for that video later. Okay, James, can you give us our read on what we just were looking at and any recommendations?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that immediately come to mind. And when we talk about building construction knowledge in the fire service, a lot of times we try to oversimplify things, and we look at like different materials, like, you know, wood burns quick or it burns, and then concrete. A lot of times we'll talk about concrete as having inherent fire resistive qualities, but we oversimplify things to the point where you might have new firefighters or people that aren't necessarily haven't learned about the stuff yet, and they see concrete and they think that it's safe, or there's less risk. But we really have to be able to identify the difference between cast in place or like monolithic poured concrete and what you're showing there with the precast, where it's very segmental. So that, like, as soon as you look at all those buildings and the pictures that you showed, it really relies on the connection points for all your structural stability. And all those buildings are designed to be used as one solid system. So you start to lose one of those connection points, and then it ends up going from there. So I think like a key thing for the viewers is when you're looking at these types of buildings is to think about it. Is it monolithic? Is it all tied together one solid pour, or is it a bunch of little pieces that's relying on connection points, which all those connection points end up being susceptible to fire damage at some point?
Now, what does the term cold joint mean to you?
In what way are you referencing it?
I have a mentor, and he mentions cold joints as opposed to a monolithic pour where they would pour the tie beam with the column all at the same time. So, can you have monolithic without having to pour it all at the same time?
I guess you could, like, if you're I'm trying to think of what an example of that would be, but there's definitely
column.
What was that? Sorry?
Tie beam in a column.
Yeah. So you have multiple individual pieces, and then you're using something to tie it all together after.
Okay, which is
for sure
rebar.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we show the next picture? And I'd like to ask Mike because his department has very specific rules on these types of roofs. Okay, this is from a NIOSH, and you know what this is. You got the melted asphalt that ran down the exterior wall. This is consistent with a combustible metal deck roof fire. And do we have one more picture? Yeah, Captain Mike, they cut this roof, and you can see you've got your corrugated metal deck there that looks like about 18 or 20 gauge. And then you've got your probably poly isocyanurate insulation. You've got some kind of board there to cover the insulation. I believe they call it like a roof board or recovery board. And then you've got, in this case, you've got modified bitumen and then or hot mopped.
Yep.
Yeah, and then a gravel ballast. Now, Mike, I know that you guys have specific rules on the FDNY when it comes to certain commercial roofs. So we all kind of looked at the FDNY for what they're doing and what their policies are. So could you give us a little bit of insight as to your department's view of commercial roofs?
Well, again, it depends on what the commercial roof is made of and what type of building it is. You have to know, and you have to know your district, and you have to know your buildings from a size up. Is it an older bowling alley, supermarket, bowstring truss? I mean, we can go back to 78 in the wall bombs fire where we lost the 6 men. Okay, bowstring truss roofs are dangerous. Is it a pre-tensioned concrete roof? And if you're cutting into that, are you cutting that, you're going to cut that tension? Is it a metal roof? Well, very honestly, the metal roofs, if you go up and look at it, and I highly recommend everyone out there, if they're putting a new metal roof in a building near you, you go out there and drill on it. Look at where they line the pieces of the metal up, and they don't have to join together over a support. There doesn't have to be a support. It can be over a couple of inches and they weld it together. So now if the support is here and you're cutting on this side of the support, now you don't have anything. If you're cutting here and it's just tack welded over here, you're going to have a problem. You're going to be standing on unsupported, okay? Because the metal is rigid when it goes up there, but we all know what heat does to the metal. You can look at Frank Brannigan's construction book. You can look at Vinnie Dunn's construction book, and you can say what's going to happen to this roof structure and also our concrete roofs. I think a lot of the damage that happens to those concrete roofs, like you show, is that pre-tensioned concrete. When it gets heated, the steel has to expand. It expands and it changes the tensioning, and then the concrete loses its strength because the material is moving. It's ripping inside it. So all of those points. And the other thing is on your walls, if they're only 4 inches allowed and now it starts to deflect down and then it's cooled, it might pull off that wall and cause a catastrophic failure. So you have to have an idea of what type of building you are in and what the roofing system is. One of my favorite things is a good company officer going in to any kind of a commercial building. There's smoke. It could be that light smoke condition, that paper, burning cardboard, whatever else. You're going to be there for a long time. First thing you do is have somebody pop a hole or a tile in the ceiling and look up. If you have practiced with your thermal imaging camera, you should be able to identify the construction from underneath because you have practiced this in all of your other buildings.
I don't know. Jimmy will be, Jimmy Davis, captain of Engine 43, will be with us, but he sent us all a group email, and he relates to refers to a double LODD fire where two firefighters in Chicago entered a bowstring truss roof building. And the issue here wasn't initially a collapse, but it was that space up above between the bottom cord and the top cord is massive, so that it acted as a reservoir for hot, flammable gases. And I could be wrong on this, and I will correct myself later if I am.
Jimmy's jumping on. He just landed back at quarters.
Okay, I'm gonna have him tell the story. If
But in speaking about that, Bill, out doing building inspection with the FDNY, went into some old buildings that were truss buildings. And if you are a student of the fire service, you know about Hackensack Ford. But in Hackensack Ford, they went up into the attic space where the trusses were, and they stored all of the parts up in the attic space. We have gone into buildings where the owners of the building have cut out some of the between the top web and the bottom web, the spaces to put plywood down and put supplies up there. Well, now they're changing the whole dynamic of the engineering of that cord, because they're putting it under a stress, depending on whether it's an old heavy timber or a newer one. People are doing this. You have to get out. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Cap.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, that brings up like a really good point. We talk about like the twin T system, and you talk about the heat losing that tension in the pre-tension cables. It's the same thing as when we have like a truss like Hackensack, where they had all the auto parts stored on the top side. As soon as we lose the tension in a horizontal structural member like those T's, we're flipping the load on it, and we're loading the structural member in a way that wasn't intended. And that's, you know, Hackensack, that's a good kind of a very similar phenomenon as what happens when you lose the tension in those beams.
James, I participated in Montgomery County, Maryland. Montgomery County, Maryland. We a USAR building collapse drill, and they brought in a huge twin T and put it on the top of the rubble pot. Now, you know, the twin is designed and intentioned to be the weight is be supported in the ends, and they put that thing and it just cracked like a cookie, just like that. And I'm not completely sure, but I believe that was also a factor in the Florida International University walkway bridge collapse of a few years ago. Before Jimmy comes on, Clark and I have discussed this in the past. It has to do with roof coverings. Clark, you were telling me about a fire where you chased you guys off the roof, and because of the type of either the insulation or the covering that was installed. Do you recall that incident?
Yes. Yeah, that was a near miss for our agency. We had an old large big box, and a church bought it. And so they're remodeling the church, and they were underneath tack welding doing some repairs, tack welding the metal trusses to the Q decking, the metal deck roof. The roof covering was styrofoam, 2 inches of styrofoam covered with the TPO that you're talking about, Captain Gustin. And then they must have had a roof leak at some point, because they put another inch of polystyrene coating and another TPO on top of it. So that was the roof decking. So they had the heat from the tack welding underneath started the polystyrene on fire, and the truck company entered on the Delta side. There was a very strong wind going from Bravo to Delta. So they entered downwind, entered as soon as, and I've got pictures and videos of all this. As soon as they crossed the parapet, they took a look at it. It was about 100 square feet of fire. It was about a 10 by 10. They entered the roof. They started hooking up their hoses. They were going to use the truck as a standpipe. They're hooking 2.5-inch hoses to the front of the bucket. And the helmet cam is them looking down, getting their hoses, their nozzles ready. And then you can just see the shadow of the smoke over them. And as the firefighter looks up with his helmet camera, the fire is in his face. It was about 60 seconds. The fire traveled 150 feet in 60 seconds and was this massive. It went from about 100 square feet to about 250,000 square feet. I'm sorry, to about 12,000 square feet of burning material. And chased them onto the bucket. They dropped everything. They left the saws on the roof. They left the hoses on the roof, pulled the bucket off, and it was a legitimate near miss. And some things they didn't take into consideration were the roofing material. And that was the only thing that was burning was the polystyrene. It was the styrofoam roofing material. And we need to treat this. They should have treated this like a wildland fire. All right. You need to stand in the black. You need to be upwind, fight the fire downwind. They pretty much got caught on an urban wildland fire. They were standing in the fuel and they were downwind from the fire. And it flashed on them and it came down. And the pictures and the videos are next hangout. We'll show the videos and the pictures of it. But we damn near lost a whole truck company that day. The whole truck company.
You know, there are a couple of things like that, Clark. I don't know if you remember the Sacramento close call with the brothers on the Sacramento where they jumped onto the parapet.
Yeah, the nail roof.
The nail salon roof.
Yeah.
And it was a roof over with sheetrock. Okay. It was the Den's deck was the material that they used. But it was a sheetrock over because they were leaking into the place that was making the fake nails in the nail salon. They were making them in the back room. So they had all of the chemicals in there, and that water doesn't do well with the chemicals. And they were up on the roof and they were cutting it. And when you get the gypsum roof decking, they got the white powder, didn't think about it too much and nothing coming out of the hole. And I talked to one of the guys who was on the roof and he goes, and I look over and there's fire coming out of the air conditioning unit on the roof. And he goes, it should have clicked. It should have clicked. It didn't. And he goes, I didn't think about that. And then the roof just dropped and they got to the parapet and got off. And it was so close that it was unbelievable. So there are so many of those close calls that we get, that we have, as you said, with the burning roof material and everything else. It happens frequently. We get these things.
I got a question for Clark, if that's okay, Kat.
Of course.
So, like for us, and probably for Kat and Dugan and stuff on the East Coast, Florida, you guys on the West Coast, this deal with panelized roofs and other things in your commercial. Up here, we don't have that in Canada. Like when we go to a commercial, we have a very, very good idea of what's going to be underneath our feet or above our heads. Do you guys is there clear signs of something's going to be typical open web steel joists and Q decking versus panelized, or is that something that you're cutting an inspection hole right away, or is that your identification?
First saw comes off the truck, we put an inspection hole right where we stand, and not right where we stand. We take a couple steps so it's not in the path of egress. We put an inspection hole, and we're looking for 5 things. We're looking for the type of construction. We're looking for the direction of construction. We're looking to the thickness of the roofing material, the location of the fire, and the amount of smoke. That's immediately before we take another step onto that roof. I need those five questions answered right there.
Because it's interesting. I was in the Sacramento area teaching a number of years ago, and there was on one side of the street, there was forget the area, out Sacramento metro area, but there was a tilt-up building with panelized on one side that was being built. And then on the other side, it was a concrete masonry unit with open web steel joists and Q decking, and they were both going up at the same time. And the outside, you'd have no idea which one was panelized and which one, and they were, built at the same time, essentially. So,
Clark, would you please repeat those 5 factors that you consider?
Right. So we're going to make an inspection cut, and it's big enough that you can actually put your head in and take a look underneath. And you're looking for the type of construction, just like James was saying. Are we on a panelized? Are we on a steel web truss? Are we on concrete? So you're looking for the type of construction. You're also looking for the direction of construction. If it's a panelized, I'm looking for the main beam. All right. I'm looking for the main beam. So type of construction, direction of construction. I want to know the thickness and the type of the roofing material. So I know if it's a metal deck, and I'd like to talk to both, all 3 of you gentlemen, what are your thoughts on actually cutting a metal deck for ventilation? How do you do it? Yeah, I've had very, very bad experiences, even with all the different types of blades we have, can't get through a metal deck roof, especially if it has insulation on it. In Las Vegas, we have no metal deck roofs that aren't insulated, because the inside of your building would be 150 degrees if you didn't insulate it. So to get through all the roofing material and then access the metal deck and then try to put a saw in a metal deck, especially on a large commercial, mathematically speaking, if you want to ventilate a Home Depot, your standard Home Depot is 105,000 square feet, and it's 30 feet tall. So doing the math, that's 3,100,000 cubic feet of air inside that building. If you want to use a mathematical formula to ventilate a Home Depot, you're going to need a hole that's 30 by 100 feet to successfully ventilate a Home Depot. I don't know about you guys, but to cut a metal deck roof, a 30 by 100 foot hole in a metal deck roof, that's going to take, you can come back shift trade. You guys are going to have to relieve you on the roof. The next shift is going to have to finish the hole for you.
I think 2 shifts.
2 shifts, yeah. So anyway, back to the original question, Captain Gustin. So you're looking for the type and thickness of roofing material, and then you want to know if you can see fire or color and density of smoke coming out of the hole. So those are the 5 factors, the 5 questions we need answered before we take another step onto that roof.
We're past the midpoint. I just want to shout out again to my good friends at Key Hose, Mark Lighthill and Dave Hibben. Dave Hibben from DC Engine 10, and one of the busiest engine companies in the world when he was on it, and running door-to-door socialized medicine calls day and night with an occasional fire thrown in. So did we ever get Jimmy on board, or did he have to roll out the door again?
Oh, no.
Okay. Mike, can you talk to us about gypsum deck on commercial buildings?
Gypsum deck on commercial buildings. Gypsum deck roofing material. Different manufacturers, different things. Gypsum deck was the new best thing to come through. And everybody was using it. It was supposed to be on all commercials. I have pictures in one of my PowerPoints of a firehouse in New York State getting a gypsum deck roofing material on the roof. The problem with gypsum deck is gypsum is vulnerable to moisture. Okay, the dense deck is sheetrock with a thin layer of of fiberglass on it to hold its strength together.
Right. Correct.
We get gypsum deck. We say it, and gypsum deck. I don't have the thing with me, but the gypsum deck, we have a PowerPoint slide that New York City put together where they're using nails to hold gypsum deck roofing in place. 6-penny nails to hold gypsum decks in place. The problem is it's a nail. And if the deck gets wet, the nail starts to oxidize. The other thing is the gypsum's deck, just like we talked about the metal, the support is here. It could end on either side of the support. And now you cut the gypsum and you're standing on air. There is no support underneath it. They stagger the ends of it and they're tongue and groove. So you could have a 1/2 inch of gypsum decking on the roof with a groove going into that tongue. So you're talking about the groove being less than 1/4 inch. Okay, holding that together. So we say if you get up there and you see that white powdery substance coming out of the saw, means it's a gypsum deck roof. Immediately notify command and get off the roof. Get off the roof. If you get up there and you put your saw down and it goes through the roof like warm butter, and you look at your bunker pants and it looks like you stepped in dog, you know what, and there's mud and stuff all over your bunker pants, that's wet gypsum being shot up by your saw. Get off the roof. We do not put firemen on gypsum roofs because of the danger, the inherent danger of gypsum roofs. Okay, it's not allowed. We're not going to do it. And if you see it going up there, you should go up there and see what they're putting on there. See how it's done. When I was teaching a lot of building construction stuff, I used to lie like a rug and say I was a contractor, and I'd call these companies and say, could you send me stuff? And I still have pieces of hurricane windows, Den's deck, and everything else that I've gotten. And you look at these things and try to figure out how they are doing this. And it's engineered, but it's not engineered for us, the impact load, for a stream hitting it, an impact load, or the fire damaging the support that's underneath it. So we have a major problem here. So we have to look at what our roofs are made of. You have to know your district and you have to know your buildings. And if in doubt, find out. Go up and sound that roof, as we said. Sound it. See what's going on up there. Figure out what you're going to do. Do not commit yourself too far onto these roofs until you know what's going on underneath you. And we talked about the steel roof, the gypsum roof is the same thing. If you need to ventilate that building, there's that much fire load underneath you on a metal deck or a gypsum roof, you do not belong on the roof. The support systems are probably already starting to fail. So you don't belong going up there, okay? Now, in the city of New York, we go up onto the roofs and we will ventilate natural ventilation holes. The other thing you all have to look at on roofs is what happened in Denver with the line of duty where the guy fell through the roof panel skylight, which is plastic. And it has happened a couple of different times where guys have fallen through these things, okay? And that happens. We had it happen in the city of New York in a repair. People are breaking into the building through the roof. So they take out the skylight, and instead of putting the 2x10s that the roof was made out of, what 2x12s, they put in 2x4s and they just cover it with tar paper. And they make, so now a fireman is up there right through the roof. We call that a fireman's trap. Okay, you got to know what's going on. If you're in an inspection of a building and you look up and see a difference in construction up there, and I was up in New Hampshire one time looking at this huge building that used to make tanks for the space shuttle. 70 feet up, they took the skylight out and they re-put it back in with 2x8 construction when the rest of the roof was steel.
Did we lose Jimmy? Peter, I see you're muted, but does anybody see Jimmy?
Yeah, Jimmy is on, but I think he stepped away, unfortunately, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we have very much the same feelings about that. Mike, we had a brother on our job, Avery Hill, who was on a drill and stepped onto a gypsum deck roof on a drill, and the water had deteriorated the gypsum, and to the point that it was, well, you know what drywall happens when you get it wet. That's it. It's like you say, it's that muck. The poor man fell through the roof 30 feet, snapped his, it is a miracle that he came back to where he could have gone off, but he had as we say in Miami, he had the corazon, and but it doesn't have to be a fire. It could just be a bad water leak. In fact, most of my pictures of water damaged gypsum roofs were taken in medical calls where roofers had fallen through it. And can I mention one other thing while we're still looking for Jimmy? If you go to a fire and there's roofers there and there's a fire that is in the attic or on the roof deck, or the roofers have just left, if there is not a tar kettle there, it's a torch, it's a torch, it's a torch all day long. I don't care what the roofers tell you, it is a torch, and they're putting down a torch down, typically a modified bitumen roofing material. And if I remember right, James, you are not supposed to torch apply a roof to a combustible substrate. Is that correct?
It's illegal in New York City to use a torch applied roofing system on any roof of combustible construction. Now, you can do it on a metal roof, you can do it on the concrete roof, but you cannot do it on a roof of combustible construction.
Now, Mike, there was a couple of, like 4 or 5 summers ago, you guys had a rash of fires, roof fires, a rash. And so is this, did they change the ordinance after that rash of roof fires? Oh, it's always been that way.
It's been that way for a long time, Bill, probably 15, 20 years. But again, you're getting people who are not licensed. If you do a torch applied roof, you have to have a certificate of fitness to use the torch, which is a license from the city of New York. You have to have a permit for the combustible gases in the city of New York to transport them. You have to have all of these different things, okay? So now what happens is you get these guys working for $200 a day, and they're up there and they don't have any of the procedures or anything else. They end up going up on the roof, starting a fire. They don't even know they started the fire. And the same thing happened, where was that place in New Jersey where they had that huge fire? They burnt the whole building to the ground. It was the
Edgewater or
Avalon
yeah.
Avalon Bay.
Glenny's.
Avalon Bay, maybe, but it was an
Yeah.
Avalon. And that was, they were working in the walls with a torch. Okay. Again, they don't have the right certificates. They don't have the right knowledge. In the city of New York, you have to take a class to become certified for fire watch for the torch. If you are using a torch in construction, you have to have a fire guard on the level you are using it and the level below. You have to have clear of combustible materials for 30 feet around the torch, 30 feet in all directions. You have to have a watch that has a fire extinguisher, or the fire extinguisher was within 25 feet of him, I think it is. It might be 30. And he has to have a clear view of sight and a path of travel. These are all rules in the city of New York that they make for construction sites because of the number of fires we have had. I mean, I can't tell you the number of fires I've been to where I have seen the tar shoe prints coming down the stairs as we're going up there, okay? The guys hanging off the back of the roofing truck like the clowns on the circus wagon driving down the road as the fire trucks are pulling down the block. You know exactly what they did, okay? And they disappear, and you never hear from that company again. And they started the building on fire. I mean, I've been to some great fires where these guys did it with torches. It happens frequently. So there has to be the commercial fires. The thing about commercial fires that always sticks out in my mind is we don't do commercial fires as much as we do residential. So we're less frequent. But what happens in commercial fires is we lose probably a larger percentage-wise of our people for the fires. And we give them a name.
Yeah.
It's the Walbaum's fire. It's the Hackensack Ford. It's the Mary Pang. I can go on and on and on about the Southwest Southwest Supermarket, the Super Sofa Store. Okay, you can go on and on and on about these things. Okay, again, you got to be very, very careful about those things. And somebody from Facebook, from Bill Carey, talked about John Whelan in Denver was on the roof and the fire wasn't even in that building. He was checking for extension, okay, and fell through the translucent skylight, okay, on the roof. These happen if they're in your district, and thank you, Bill, for that. But these guys, if this is in your district, if you have translucent skylights, you have to know about this. And this has to be every time you get a new kid. Hey, you're assigned to the truck. Come on, we're going out to 2 Main Street. That's that warehouse. They have translucent skylights. You're going up on this roof and seeing what they look like, how they're laid out. And you know what? I'm probably going to put it in my dispatch notes for that address that we're not going up on a roof. I'm not going to risk a guy's life to save whatever the building is.
It might,
So-
in, these type 2 non-combustibles, cheap, like almost like a prefab building. The translucent skylight has exactly the same contour as the metal deck roof. So you don't know, but the biggest hazard is there's no, in the terms of the roofing industry, curbing, if you will, curbing, a little
A
boiler.
parapet for us, a parapet. There's no parapet around
Yeah,
that.
yeah, like a parapet. Yeah, right. There is none.
No,
So you don't know that you're going to get that. Clark, while we're on the subject of roof coverings, what's your experience with fires and tar kettles?
I've been on only a couple of them, and I've never seen this. But we don't have a lot of tar kettle anymore with the new the polystyrenes. The majority of all of our roofs are going with the polystyrenes. It's way cheaper. It's way easier. You don't have to have any skilled labor to install it. But I remember coming on as a young fireman. The old senior guy said, "Don't ever put water on a tar pot. Don't ever put water on a tar pot fire. Don't ever do it." And that's all they just harped on that. Don't ever put water in a tar pot because it will explode and send boiling hot tar everywhere.
Your mama warned you, do not
Yeah.
put cold, wet chicken wings in the hot oil. Okay, so it's my understanding to bring that asphalt to a molten state, they bring it up to about 650 degrees and then work with it at a working temperature of 450 degrees. Well, last time I checked, you indirectly put water on it. In other words, it's like the Monsignor going down the aisles there, giving everybody holy water, a little bit on the lid side, little bit in the thermal column so that it flashes the steam before it hits the surface and then forms an emulsion. The most qualified guys to put out tar kettles are little old Cuban men about this tall, with a beat up old wife beater shirt and an old beat up straw hat. They've put out so many of those friggin' fires with a garden hose, but they play with it. You know, they come up and they give it a dash and give it a dash, and yeah, a little bit of it comes out, but they're ready for it. But if you put a stream in there directly, oh my God, the last time I checked, I think water at the boiling point expands 1,700 times. So you can imagine it will come out of there like a friggin' with a vengeance. And I hear these guys say, "I was just a tar kettle." Just a tar kettle is a big deal, brother. First of all, what about the LP gas?
turn it off immediately.
Yeah, how about that?
Turn it off immediately. Stop the heating.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely.
And they'll be pissed if you turn it off because
Yeah,
they won't even be able to go back to work. Just put the fire out a little bit and they'll be pissed. But you know what? You turn it off. You protect your men, your women, your people. You protect them. You turn off the gas immediately.
As far as those metal deck roofs, the decking we were talking about with the skylights in it, typically you're going to find those fiberglass skylights on Butler. We call them Butler style buildings,
yes,
which is
yes.
right.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, there's no reason to put any companies on the roof of a Butler style building. They're not designed to hold. They're not designed to hold the weight of a firefighter in full gear with the saw. They're going to be well north of 300 pounds. You put two firefighters together and you're going to go through that corrugated metal. They are not designed to hold people. It is a disposable building to keep the rain out. They're not insulated whatsoever. It is a piece of garbage building that we typically find in chop shops and a lot of illegal stuff going on underneath. So you shouldn't even be. In fact, we have a policy. We do not go vertical on Butler style buildings.
See, and we had a couple of firehouses in New York City made out of those, and we called them the tin houses.
Was that just temporary, Mike?
No. They were there for a long time. Tin house. Yep.
Yeah.
Some that we see too up here, because we're like kind of like the Pacific Northwest, like very moist, lots of precipitation. We get a lot of mildew up on those roofs too. So I've seen those translucent panels, those like corrugated like plexi, and they basically, like, you can't tell the difference. They get so much mildew and stuff on them, and kind of like that mossy stuff, and you can't tell the difference between that and the roof decking.
And the other thing about that, that's very important to all of us, is how old is the building? The sun affects that plastic. Look at your headlights. I just had to replace, my wife has a 10-year-old car. She loves a Honda Pilot. And I just had to replace both washer nozzles because they've been in the sun. We don't have a garage. It's in a driveway. They've been in the sun for 10 years and they cracked and broke. Well, guess what? That building's 10 years old. That translucent skylight has been subjected to the sun for 10 years and is going to be more brittle. And again, I can't emphasize this enough to the brothers and sisters out there. Know your buildings. Go out there and drill on them. And if you're second due to this place, well, the first due company could be out. Go and drill on it. Go with your neighboring companies. Go with your neighboring departments and drill on buildings. One of my heroes is a guy from Worcester, Massachusetts, Mike McNamee, who was the chief who stood at the bottom of the stairs and said, no more guys. No more guys are going into Worcester cold storage warehouse on December in 1999. Okay. Again, he did that. Okay. He stood there and said no more. But he said, and one of the things that I love to use this, if you have a building that you are worried about in your response area, you better be there once a month, looking at it, planning it. If there's some place that scares you, well, if your people aren't prepared to fight a fire in that building, there is something wrong with your training. Get out there and understand your buildings.
Peter, I sent you a safety bulletin that I had abridged or edited to take out some of our proprietary information that pertains strictly to my department about when a thermal imaging camera is not enough to find your way out. You think you're going to be able to post that anytime soon?
Well, yeah, I'm hoping to get it up later this week, if not today. But yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Guys, thermal imager is great, but if all you're doing is looking at a maze of walls, you're not going to find your way out. There's no substitute. And this is why I was hoping that Jimmy was going to be able to participate with us. He probably got another run, probably a 211 or a 311, maybe a still-in box, or back porches. That's all Chicago lingo.
He's coming back on right now.
Oh,
We'll see.
oh, okay, all right. Because I'm going to let him talk about the ropes, about the search ropes.
Rope assisted search. Okay.
Yes, Mike, it's not enough to pick us
RASP,
not
we
enough.
call it rope assisted search procedures, RASP. And again, it's important.
Jimmy, you got it, brother. You got it.
Unmute, Jimmy.
Unmute and take us home.
Hi, everyone. A little bit late, sorry. Juggling calls in between. Where did you guys pick up or leave off at here? It sounded at the time I was in, you had some good discussion going on. Actually,
Jimmy, I know you have very strong thoughts about search ropes. I'm going to have a feature maybe today, maybe tomorrow on the title is when ticks are not enough to find your way out. And it alludes to the need for the search ropes in especially in commercial occupancies. Oh, in highly renovated residential occupancies as well. But the two things I wanted you to talk about would be your ropes and why you find them so necessary and when you find them so necessary. And then the tragic fire where you lost the two firemen because of the gases that collected up into the arch of a bowstring truss. And we don't have any hard and fast time when we have to stop. So Jimmy, you go ahead and take the floor and bring us home.
Yeah, and Cap, I'll talk about first the second part with the line of duty death with Patrick King, who was a friend of mine. A line of duty death hurts very much. Not only that to happen anywhere, but when you personally know people, the impact is much greater. And he died alongside our brother, Anthony Lockhart from Engine 120. It was truck 45 where Patty King was, Lockhart from Engine 120. What the thing was that I wanted to emphasize in these commercial buildings is popping or displacing a ceiling tile at your point of entry, just to kind of see what conditions are, gently put it back. All right, as you start digging deeper into the building, you got to make sure that your egress is not cut off. Plus, these conceal a ton of fire up there. Now, fast forward a little bit about that day at 107th and Western was, it was a bowstring building. The fire originated up in the storage area. And as a side note, they use that bow area where that hump is for storage. I mean, that's usable space. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get some type of fire up there. So what happened was the fire originated up there. You had at the ground floor, right? And this was a tire mechanic shop. So you had a very light haze, but above in the heat sink, underneath of the bowl, you had a raging fire going on. So there was some conflicting reports with the truck team, exterior and interior reports. You know, we got fire venting out, fire blowing through the roof, but then inside, you got a light haze. 2 and 2 isn't equaling 4. 2 and 2 isn't adding up whatsoever. There was, to this day, we don't know exactly what happened. There may have been a failure of a service garage, which would be a huge inlet for fresh air. After that, the rest becomes history. They lost their lives in their way trying to get out of this building. All right. So I wanted to make mention of that too, is that really take some caution steps and really investigate when you're going deep into a large footprint building, especially a commercial building. And that going now to that first question of the search ropes. Now that's in our protocol, and anyone who's listening, I would strongly advise doing that, especially if we're going into, again, a large footprint area commercial building where visibility is going to be a factor. An example, having a fire, or even if they had obscurity of smoke, you got to have some type of breadcrumbs to get yourself out of this building. So it's protocol for us here in our department is that search rope is going. And this especially holds true in windowless buildings. And the thing that really just clicks in my mind is Gustin, the cold storage, where we lost all our brothers that fateful day. Could the aid of a search rope may have helped? Yes. In these buildings, if you're disoriented, you're offline, and you lose your bearings, you are going to be lost. So that is a built-in safety system. You know, when you're deep into these buildings, you're going to have 2 reliances. Either that hose line, try not to get off that hose line, or using that search rope are going to be your 2 defaults to getting your way out of that building and bringing yourself and your crew home. I can't stress the importance. If you're looking to examine what you're doing in commercial buildings, include that search rope again, build the stack of cards in your favor so you can find yourself out of this place.
And one thing I want to say, Jimmy, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on all that. When I worked on the search rope procedure for the FDNY, one of the things that I really pushed for is there are 2 types of searches off a search rope. There's a search for life when the fire has been knocked down or is controlled. And then there's a search for fire. If I am searching for fire and I am going in on a search rope, I do not advance more than 50 feet away from that hose line. Because of rapid fire progression in buildings today with the fuel load and everything else, the high ceilings, whatever else, I run a hose line to protect my crew. I go in 50 feet. I'm on 50 feet on my rope and I know I'm at 50 feet. Okay, bring the hose line to me. You're going to protect me. I'm still looking for that fire. I can't find it yet. And thermal imaging cameras are a big help. But if you can't find this, it's that cardboard warehouse, stacked rags, cotton. You can't find this fire. You're looking all over. It's cold smoke. You don't know when the air is going to hit it, when it's going to ignite, or what's going to happen, and the space is up over your head. There are two types of searches there. Make sure your people know the difference. Make sure they know the difference.
Mike, on the topic of cold smoke, I attended a school in Rome, Georgia by FM Global, Fact and the topic was fighting fire in sprinklered buildings. And they take you into a burn building and with light smoke, and there's a fire burning. And when that sprinkler head goes off, Mike, it is lights out. The downdraft and the cooling action of one sprinkler head drives that smoke right to the floor. And man, if you're not on a hose and you're not on a rope, you're not finding your way out.
Bill, one of my favorite stories for me was I was a covering lieutenant. I was working in a truck company and we went out for a water leak, and it was in a commercial warehouse, and you could hear the alarm going off, the sprinkler alarm outside, and there was water running down the stairs. We get in there and we forced the door. We got a job. Now it's cold smoke and all that. And I have my chauffeur get on the radio and say, transmit the box and give it 1075. And they're like, it's a water leak. He goes, no, it's a sprinkler head. Transmit the box and send us help. We need help. We were probably there for 4.5 hours because it was in a place that had, was doing rags and had all of this stuff. And one sprinkler head went off, but we had to go through and tear all of this stuff up. And the cold smoke, you know, it's fatal to you because the cold smoke cools down all the gases. In and out, rotating guys in and out for about 3 or 4 hours for a water leak. You never know.
Yeah, Cap, if I can jump on here and land pretty close to you too, especially with the cold smoke, you need to know where you're going to put your next foot forward. I can recall a fire that I had was an industrial building, another, again, large footprint. But what they had was acid vats, all right? 1 foot to 2 foot above grade that you could have easily, all right, not seeing where you're going, fall into one of these vats. It was a metal plating companies, man, are dangerous to begin with. They have all kinds of stuff. But can you imagine that? Where does that foot go forward? And also with Dan Capuano is another brother we lost in the line of duty too, in these commercial buildings, emphasizes the point, where is that foot going to go? If you are obscured and your visibility is obscured, what do they tell us in day one of the academy? Get your knees, feel what's in front of you. Use a probe, the end of your pipe pole, see what's ahead of you. And again, the reliance on the tick. But you also have to have some basic minimum skills that you need to employ too if you don't have a tick. A lot of reliance on the tick, but not every fireman carries that on.
That's a good
I
point.
personally believe the number one tool that you can take into a commercial building is commercial tactics and commercial strategies. And those guys, I think that's what caused those guys in Worcester to get jammed up. They started searching the footprint. I think the footprint of that building was 15,000 square foot footprint. And they went into a 15,000 square foot room and they started searching like they were searching a single family house. And they got turned around and the lights went out and they couldn't find their way back. They weren't using ticks. That's before they even had ticks. They weren't using search ropes. And it was taking residential tactics and strategies into commercial structures. And that is what's going to get us in trouble every single time.
Clark, to your point, that is absolutely correct. And I have to wonder out loud, how many firefighters have been killed because they were using residential hose lines, residential tactics, a residential quick attack mentality on a commercial building. And I think we're all students here, so we know there's quite a few. And I've been caught in that trap as well. The thing is, you get lucky. You get lucky because you're successful when you go into that dollar store with an 1 3/4 line and a quick attack off the booster tank, and man, you got it, and then you pat yourself on the back. You just reinforced the kind of behavior that's going to get some people killed. And Jimmy, you brought something up about that fire, and I think you said 107th and Western. The size up from inside and the size up from either from the roof or on the roof. And, I'm a low-tech guy. I finally got one of these, but drones, bring them on, brother. Bring on the friggin' drones. I'm all for it. Get a drone up there, get it around to the Charlie side, get it up on the roof. You can be clear as a bell, and the fire's ripping through the roof. And I do believe that was a factor in the Chinese restaurant in Boston. And here's the other thing. Jimmy, you brought this up in the email. We always tend to go through the front of a commercial, where if it's a restaurant, if it's a business, where the heck's the fire going to be? Yeah, granted, it's locked up like Fort Knox, but the fire is going to be in the back.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get to the back, we can get it with a 50-foot reach of our stream, rather than going like in the Southwest supermarket, going through a serpentine of turnstiles and racks. I think that was one of your points.
You have to jump onto that too. I remember, and that was a lesson learned when you got to pick up 400 to 500 feet of hose. So we had a fire like that too, smoky conditions. Once the fire is out, we evacuated the smoke. Guess what you saw? A man door not less than 50 feet away. So those assessments, your point of access of where you're going to get in is you try to make a best assessment in the shortest route to the fire, which is going to be the safest route. Give me a 400, 500 foot lead out into these industrial buildings when you had something close by at 50 feet.
And not just what we really need to train on is not just going into the building, but how are we going to get out of this building, right? Turn around and look constantly. You take 5 steps and you turn around and you look at where you came from. You take 5 more steps and you turn around and look where you came from. In a commercial, actually all fires, but especially commercial buildings, you have to be thinking, how am I going to get out of here if stuff goes bad? Am I going to be able to get out of here? Where's my egress? Did I make a hole large enough in the roll-up door that we can all run out, or are we going to have to crawl down because we made the old teepee cut that I'm sure we all learned on 20 years ago? Are we going to have to crawl down on our hands and knees to get out of the hole, or are we going to be able to run out standing up? All right.
Can you talk about air supply for a minute, Clark, in these big buildings?
50% air supply. 50% you should be leaving the building. All right. What I also heard, we're training also 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 going in, 1/3 coming out, and you have to have 1/3 in reserve when you get out, just in case. So that's something else. So again, extremely manpower intensive. If you're telling these guys you can only work for 15 minutes, now you're going to send a company and you can work for 15 minutes and now you have to get out. All right, you better have a lot of companies to rotate in there, because and guys who don't, if you are working until your bell goes off in a commercial building, you are dangerous. You are going to get yourself, your company, and other people hurt or killed, because when you go down, now you're risking the lives of all of the RIT teams, everyone, to get you. It is just bad business. Again, commercial, residential tactics and strategies into commercial buildings.
Yeah, Kip, I wanted to add on that. And with our search rope that we use through on a rope assisted search, we have little knots or spaced at 50-foot intervals. That is a time that we use in our department, and I think it makes sense as you do an air supply check. That gets radioed back. So if you come across 2 knots, you know you're 100 feet in. Now it's a great time to do an air supply check so you don't extend and exceed what you're going to have, because you're going to need that air to get back out.
Absolutely.
So it's a safety stop. It's a stop to examine and assess your air supply, that you have enough to come out. I agree with you 100% in that, Clark. You suck that bottle down, you're in big trouble.
Guys, we're going to wrap this up for this month. Well, we've got plenty to talk about next month. James, I want you to come back, brother, if you can.
Absolutely.
Even if you're on dog sled or whatever, however you guys do it. And, we want you back. We like seeing you. And even though you do look like a drummer in an Irish punk rock band, we love you, man. We love you. And so, fellas, until next month, remember Bobby Halton in your prayers. And if you had any experience with him, you know you are a better person and a better firefighter for it. And James, thank you so much for joining us. And
Thanks for having me.
let's continue this discussion next month. So until next month, God bless and may He keep you safe in our most noble profession.
Amen.